My girlfriend said, "I lied about loving your favorite classic book. I only pretended to impress your famous professor." She confessed this after the professor, a world-renowned author, dismissed her at a university gala. A year later, my first novel was published. My ex saw me interviewed with my new fiancée, the professor's daughter. I, 28 male, had been with my girlfriend, Sloane, 27, for 3 years. We lived a life defined by the ivy-covered walls of New Haven, Connecticut. I was a PhD candidate in English literature, a path I was passionate about, but one that came with the modest $30,000 stipend of a teaching assistant. My world was one of dusty libraries, late-night study sessions, and deep, exhilarating dives into the classics. Sloane worked in the university's development office, a PR job that put her in constant contact with wealthy alumni and powerful donors. Thank you for watching. Stay with me until the end. The story holds a twist you won't expect. Subscribe to the channel and support its growth. Our lifestyle was a study in contrasts. I was content with our small apartment, evenings spent at quiet pubs discussing literature with fellow grad students, and a life rich in ideas but not in material wealth. Sloane, however, was enamored with the world she saw at work. She craved the galas, the fundraisers, and the effortless luxury of the university's benefactors. She saw my academic path not as a noble pursuit of knowledge, but as a stepping stone to a prestigious, tenured position, a status she could leverage in the social circles she so desperately wanted to join. The centerpiece of my academic life was my mentor, Professor Alastair Finch, a world-renowned author and the leading scholar on my favorite classic novel. To me, he was a living legend. To Sloane, he was a celebrity, a connection to be cultivated. She would feign a deep interest in my work, asking me to explain complex literary theories, which I, in my love for her, mistook for genuine curiosity. The big career opportunity, when it came, was not a job offer but a terrifying leap of faith. I had an idea for a novel of my own, a story that was burning inside me. I realized that the rigid, analytical world of academia was not where I could create it. I made a decision. I was going to leave the PhD program to write my book full-time. This meant giving up my stipend, my health insurance, and the clear, stable path to becoming a professor. It was a massive financial and professional risk. I told Sloane my plan over dinner, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. I explained that this was my true calling, the work I was meant to do. I expected her, my partner, to see the passion in my eyes and support me. Her reaction was one of pure, uncomprehending disgust. "You're dropping out?" she asked, her voice incredulous. "You're throwing away a doctorate, a professorship for a fantasy?" "It's not a fantasy, Sloane," I replied. "It's my dream." "It's a pipe dream," she snapped. "Writers are poor, Julian. They're nobodies until they're dead. We have a plan. You become a professor, we have a certain kind of life. You can't just throw that away." She mocked my ambition. She called my novel idea self-indulgent nonsense. The conflict was not just about money or a career path, it was about a fundamental difference in our souls. I wanted to create art. She wanted to acquire status. And my dream was a direct threat to her ambition. Update 1. Despite Sloane's bitter opposition, I couldn't let the idea for my novel go. It had taken root in my soul. I knew I had to write it, with or without her support. But I also knew that leaving the PhD program immediately would cause an irreparable explosion in our relationship. So, I began to prepare in secret. I didn't drop out. Instead, I started writing. My life became a grueling double act. By day, I was the diligent PhD candidate, teaching classes, attending seminars, and working on my dissertation. But every night, from midnight until the early hours of the morning, I was a novelist, pouring my heart and soul into the pages of my book. I was fueled by coffee and a secret, burning purpose. Sloane remained cold and distant. The topic of my fantasy novel was a source of constant, simmering tension. She would make snide remarks, her dismissive lines a constant reminder of her disapproval. "Still scribbling in your little notebook?" she would ask when she came home to find me writing. "I'm making good progress," I would reply. "I'm sure," she would say, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just don't forget you have actual, important work to do." Her friends, who shared her obsession with status and appearances, reinforced her position. They treated my literary ambition as a quaint but foolish delusion. "You've got to be practical, Julian," one of them advised me at a party. "Sloane deserves a certain kind of life." The breaking point came at the university's annual Winter Gala, a major fundraising event that Sloane had been looking forward to for months. It was the pinnacle of her world, a room full of the wealth and influence she craved. Professor Finch was the guest of honor. Sloane spent the evening trying desperately to get his attention. She cornered him by the bar, attempting to engage him in a conversation about the very classic novel she had pretended to love. I watched from a distance, a sense of dread washing over me. Her performance was transparently false. She was dropping names and quoting analyses I had explained to her, but there was no real understanding in her eyes. Professor Finch, a man who could spot intellectual dishonesty from a mile away, was polite but visibly unimpressed. He listened for a few minutes, nodded curtly, and then excused himself, turning to speak with a colleague. He had dismissed her. The humiliation was a visible blow. Sloane's face flushed, and she stormed away from him, finding me by the silent auction table. The carefully constructed facade of the supportive, intellectual partner crumbled, and the raw, bitter resentment underneath was exposed. "This is your fault," she hissed, her voice low and furious. "What are you talking about?" I asked, and then she confessed everything. "I tried to talk to him," she said. "I used the stupid lines you gave me and he just blew me off. I did all of this for you, for us." "Did what?" I asked. "This," she said, gesturing at the room, "at my life. I lied about loving your favorite classic book. I only pretended to impress your famous professor. I don't care about any of this dense, boring stuff. I cared about the life it was supposed to give us. A life with people like him, and you're throwing it all away to write some pointless novel." Her words were a confession of a betrayal far deeper than I had imagined. Our entire intellectual connection, the foundation I thought our relationship was built on, had been a lie. It was all a performance, a means to an end she now saw me as jeopardizing. In that moment, I knew we were over. Update 2. The car ride home from the gala was silent and heavy. The truth of her confession lay between us like a physical object. When we got back to our apartment, I knew there was nothing left to say, but the confrontation had to happen. "We're done, Sloane," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "What?" she asked, feigning surprise. "Because I was honest with you. Because you were dishonest with me for 3 years," I replied. "Our entire relationship was based on a lie." "It was based on a future," she responded, her voice rising. "A future you are throwing away!" She gave me an ultimatum. I had to delete my novel, recommit myself to my dissertation, and focus solely on becoming a professor. I had to apologize to her for my selfish fantasy. Only then could we move forward. "No," I said. "I choose my work. I choose myself." The fallout was swift and ugly. She moved out the next day, her anger turning our shared space into a war zone. The weeks that followed were a cycle of her emotions. First came the furious texts, accusing me of ruining her life. Then came the bargaining emails, promising she could learn to appreciate my writing. Then came the tearful voicemails, telling me how much she missed me. Then, the anger returned. I remained detached. I did not engage. I packed up her remaining belongings and left them with a mutual friend. I formally withdrew from the PhD program. I took the money I had saved, found a tiny, cheap studio apartment across town, and I moved. The day I left our old apartment, she was nowhere to be seen. I felt nothing but a profound sense of relief. My new life was stark and solitary. I was no longer a promising academic. I was just another struggling writer. I lived on cheap coffee and ramen. I wrote 12 to 16 hours a day. The world shrank to the size of my tiny apartment and the universe I was building on the page. It was during this time that I reconnected with Eleonora, Professor Finch's daughter. I had known her casually from the department. She was a junior editor at a major publishing house in New York. I sent her a tentative email, asking if she might be willing to look at my first few chapters. She responded almost immediately. She loved them. She saw something in my work that no one else had. She became my first reader, my champion. Our professional relationship, built on a shared love for literature, slowly and naturally blossomed into something more. With Eleonora's guidance, I finished the novel. She helped me polish the manuscript and find the perfect agent. A bidding war started between publishing houses. I ended up with a 2-book deal and a 6-figure advance. The financial win was not a bonus but the validation of my art. I used the money to buy a small, quiet house in the countryside, a place where I could write in peace. I never posted about the book deal on social media. But news travels. Sloane found out. The flood of emails and texts began anew. She had heard about the book deal, the prestigious publisher. My pointless novel was suddenly a major literary event. Old friends reached out, apologizing for taking her side. My decision no longer seemed foolish, it seemed prescient. Then, she showed up at my new house unannounced. She had driven 2 hours from New Haven. She tried to act as if nothing had happened, as if her confession at the gala was a minor disagreement. She said she had always believed in me. She asked if she could move in. I calmly and methodically called out her hypocrisy. I quoted her own words back to her. You said my work was boring. You said my dream was a fantasy. You were ashamed of me. I made a mistake, she insisted. I've changed. No, I replied. My circumstances changed. You haven't. I rejected her firmly. She escalated with letters from a lawyer, making a ridiculous claim that my novel was based on her intellectual property. My publisher's legal team shut it down with a single, scathing letter. A year later, my first novel was published. It debuted to critical acclaim, hitting the bestseller list in its first week. The ultimate revenge, however, was not the success itself. It was the joint interview I did for a major literary journal. The interviewer was talking to me, the breakout author of the year, and my new fiancée, my brilliant editor, Eleonora Finch. I saw a clip of it online. I knew Sloane would see it too. Final update. A few months after the book tour, I was back in New Haven for a literary festival. My novel had been nominated for a major award. It was a surreal, full circle moment. After my panel discussion, a man approached me. It was my old mentor, Professor Alastair Finch, Eleonora's father and my future father-in-law. We had spoken many times over the past year, but this conversation felt different, more formal. He asked me to take a walk with him across the old campus green. Julian, he began, his voice full of a warmth I had rarely seen from him in my PhD days. I need to apologize to you. For what, Professor? I asked. For my own blindness, he said. When you were my student, I saw you as a brilliant academic, a first-rate scholar. I was training you to be a reflection of myself. I never saw the novelist that was inside you, fighting to get out. I was so focused on the analysis of literature that I failed to recognize the creation of it. He told me that my novel was a work of profound talent and that he was deeply proud of me. He said that leaving the program, the very act he would have once considered a failure, was the bravest and most important decision I could have ever made. And about that night at the gala, he continued with a wry smile. My daughter told me what your ex-girlfriend said. I am truly sorry you were involved with someone of such staggering superficiality. You, my boy, are the real thing. She was just chasing a reflection. His words, from the man I had idolized for so long, were a more powerful validation than any award or bestseller list. I left the festival that weekend and drove back to the quiet house in the country that I shared with Eleonora. I reflected on the painful, transformative journey I had been on. The lesson I learned was one of authenticity. Sloane's betrayal was born from a desperate need to acquire a status she hadn't earned. She saw my passion not as something beautiful, but as a costume she could wear to impress the world. When the costume no longer served her, she discarded it. My revenge was not a calculated plot. It was simply the act of being true to myself. It was in the quiet, solitary work of creation. It was in choosing my own dream over someone else's definition of success. And in doing so, I had not only created a new career, but a new life, one built on a foundation of shared passion and genuine love. I sat down at my desk, the place where I had written my first novel, and began to type the first words of my second. I was happy. I was at peace. And I was finally telling my own story.